Deep beneath the South Pole, something happened that may change the way humanity understands reality forever. Nearly 2.5 kilometers under the Antarctic ice, inside the frozen silence of the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory, a signal appeared that should not have existed. This facility was designed to study the rarest particles in the universe, invisible messengers called neutrinos, which can pass through entire planets without touching a single atom. Scientists there spend their lives waiting for tiny disturbances hidden inside endless streams of cosmic noise. Most days, nothing unusual happens. But on this occasion, the universe answered back. Dr. Sarah Jenkins sat alone inside the insulated command station, watching radiation monitors glow across the darkroom. Outside, the Antarctic night stretched endlessly across the frozen horizon. Inside, the observatory systems were carrying out another routine scan of deep space. Then the monitors erupted. Not with random interference or equipment failure, but with an organized burst of extremely high-energy neutrinos arriving in synchronized waves. The signal was clean, far too clean. Every pulse carried a repeating structure unlike anything recorded from a supernova, quasar, or collapsing star. Sarah immediately checked the calibration systems once, then twice, and then a third time, but the readings stayed the same. Something impossible was transmitting directly toward Earth. The source of the particles made the discovery even more disturbing. The trajectory did not point toward a distant galaxy or a black hole. Instead, it pointed toward an object much closer to home, anomalous object 3I Atlas, which was drifting near the orbital boundary of the Moon. Until this moment, it had been dismissed by most institutions as an unusual rogue body with strange magnetic behavior. Now, the observatory data was forcing scientists to confront a different possibility entirely. This object was not passive. It was active, and it was producing a coordinated neutrino emission pattern that violated the standard model of particle physics itself. Then came the detail that froze the entire research team. The timestamps attached to the neutrino pulses showed evidence of severe time dilation. The particles appeared to have been trapped somewhere where time moved far slower than it does on Earth. According to the incoming measurements, the signal had experienced a delay so extreme that it could only exist near a massive gravitational distortion. However, there was a problem. Object 3I Atlas was not large enough to generate that kind of effect naturally, as no known object of its size should have been capable of bending space-time this way. Sarah leaned back in silence as the realization settled in. Humanity was no longer observing a strange astronomical object. Humanity was observing technology. This was not human technology or experimental military hardware, but something operating on principles completely beyond current civilization. The equation suggested that 3I Atlas was generating a localized event horizon without collapsing into a black hole. It was creating gravitational distortions manually, almost as if space-time itself had become a programmable material. For more than a century, Einstein's theory of general relativity taught humanity that gravity alters time. The stronger the gravity, the slower time moves, to the point where near a black hole, a single hour could equal years for someone far away. Scientists once treated this as a strange mathematical curiosity until experiments proved it true. But 3I Atlas appeared to be using that principle deliberately, slowing time in a controlled region of space while remaining entirely stable. That revealed one terrifying possibility. Whoever built this object had learned how to engineer gravity itself. Across Earth, observatories and agencies immediately shifted into crisis mode as teams began studying strange lensing effects surrounding the object. The stars behind the object no longer appeared normal, as their light stretched and curved into distorted rings, providing direct evidence that space-time around 3I Atlas was warping violently. Yet, the object remained physically small while carrying the gravitational footprint of something far larger hidden beneath reality itself. The implications became impossible to ignore. To slow time on this scale would require unimaginable amounts of energy, perhaps involving negative energy states and wormhole physics that humans had only explored through equations and science fiction. Now, the James Webb Space Telescope was detecting distortions, matching predictions from advanced string theory models. The data hinted at something even stranger. Dimensions beyond the familiar 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time may not just exist, but may be accessible. Scientists watching the feeds described it like hearing the universe play music through invisible strings stretched across reality. Every pulse from 3I Atlas looked less like a natural phenomenon and more like communication, a message protected inside a slow-time corridor designed to survive across impossible distances. By slowing time around the signal, the sender could prevent information from degrading during its long journey through space. If that interpretation was correct, then humanity had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, because this was no longer just a scientific anomaly. This was first contact made directly through the fabric of space-time itself. What Sarah Jenkins would discover next would make this first signal look like the beginning of something far larger, far older, and far more terrifying than anyone on Earth was prepared to face. The moment the neutrino data was confirmed, the atmosphere inside the IceCube Observatory changed completely. This was no longer a routine scientific investigation. Every screen inside the underground facility began filling with emergency telemetry from observatories across the planet, as signals arrived faster than researchers could process them. The world's leading physicists, cosmologists, and aerospace agencies suddenly found themselves staring at the same terrifying conclusion. 3I Atlas was not behaving like a comet, asteroid, or black hole, but like a machine. Within hours, encrypted communications connected the IceCube team with analysts at NASA, CERN, and the European Space Agency. The object's gravitational signature was now impossible to deny. Light from distant stars bending around 3I Atlas had formed visible Einstein rings, proving that space-time itself was being twisted around the object, yet its physical mass remained far too small to produce such an effect naturally. It was as if the laws of gravity were being artificially amplified from inside the object. What disturbed scientists even more was the pattern hidden within the neutrino pulses. They were not random bursts of energy, but repeated in organized intervals with mathematical precision. The pulses behaved like packets of encoded information preserved inside a gravitational shell. According to theoretical models, slowing time around a signal could prevent quantum decoherence, which is the process that normally destroys delicate information over vast cosmic distances. In simple terms, someone had discovered how to keep a message perfectly intact while crossing the universe. That realization led researchers toward a frightening possibility. 3I Atlas was not just sending information, it was protecting it through time itself. As agencies continued studying the object, another anomaly appeared. 40 inactive satellites orbiting near the moon had become trapped inside a strange geometric formation surrounding 3I Atlas. At first, analysts assumed the satellites had simply drifted into its gravitational field, but new scans showed something far stranger. The satellites were frozen inside a localized time distortion, and from Earth's perspective, they barely moved at all. Inside the distortion, however, time flowed differently. The James Webb Space Telescope soon detected an extreme redshift surrounding the trapped satellites. Normally, redshift happens when objects move away from an observer, but this was different. The light itself was stretching because space inside the field was expanding at a separate rate from the space outside it. General relativity predicted such effects near rotating black holes, but never on this scale and never in a stable, controlled environment. The numbers shocked everyone involved. According to preliminary calculations, 1 hour inside the field surrounding 3I Atlas could equal nearly 7 years outside it. The implications were staggering. Anyone or anything inside that region would experience time almost standing still while the rest of the universe accelerated around them. Scientists described it as a temporal cage, and suddenly the trapped satellites no longer looked accidental. Some researchers proposed that the satellites were being scanned. Every transmission they ever carried, every image, every communication relay, and every piece of digital history stored in their systems could now be analyzed over what would feel like centuries from the perspective of whoever controlled the field. To humanity, the event had only just begun, but for the intelligence operating inside the distortion, Enough time may have already passed to study the entire technological history of civilization. That possibility sent governments into panic behind closed doors. If 3i Atlas truly possessed this level of control over gravity, then humanity was facing something far beyond advanced engineering. The object was effectively transforming spacetime into a computational system. Instead of using processors made from silicon, it appeared to use gravity itself as a form of information, storage, and analysis. Some theorists compared it to a black hole turned into a computer, while others went further. A classified physics report leaked briefly before being removed from international networks, describing 3i Atlas as a possible Type 3 artifact, a technology capable of harnessing energy on the scale of entire star systems. According to the report, the object might be using principles related to the Kerr metric, which is the mathematics describing rotating black holes, to create a frame-dragging effect around itself. In simple terms, it was twisting space-time into a rotating current like water spiraling around a drain. But unlike a black hole, it remained perfectly stable. That stability changed everything, because for decades, theoretical physics suggested that wormholes could exist if negative energy were used to hold them open. The problem was that humanity had never discovered how to generate enough negative energy to make such structures stable. Yet 3i Atlas appeared to be doing exactly that, maintaining a localized gravitational corridor without collapsing into a singularity. The impossible was no longer theoretical. And then the neutrino signals changed again. At first, the pulses had repeated steadily, almost calmly, but now the intervals between them were shrinking. The signals were accelerating, and the information rate was increasing so rapidly that supercomputers struggled to keep up. Whatever process 3i Atlas had begun was entering a new phase. Dr. Sarah Jenkins watched the updated readings appear across her terminal, and for the first time since the discovery began, genuine fear spread through the control room because the acceleration suggested something deeply unsettling. The object was no longer observing Earth. It was finishing its analysis, and if the calculations were correct, the slow time bubble surrounding 3i Atlas was beginning to contract. This meant the next stage would push the laws of physics further than humanity had ever imagined possible, and what scientists discovered hidden inside that collapsing field would force the entire world to question whether humanity had ever truly understood the universe at all. As time passed, the scientific community realized they were no longer studying an isolated anomaly, but watching an active process unfold in real time. The contraction surrounding 3i Atlas continued accelerating, and every new measurement made the situation more unsettling. The temporal field around the object was tightening like a closing fist. What had started as a strange gravitational distortion was evolving into something far more organized and far more deliberate. Inside the IceCube Observatory, Dr. Sarah Jenkins and her team noticed that the incoming neutrino bursts were no longer repeating simple patterns. The signals had become layered, and hidden beneath the original pulse structure were deeper frequencies carrying enormous amounts of compressed information. It looked less like natural radiation and more like a transmission protocol. Every sequence appeared intentionally designed, almost mathematical in its precision. But the frightening part was that nobody could decode it. Artificial intelligence systems at CERN attempted to translate the pulse intervals into language structures, numerical sequences, and symbolic frameworks, but nothing matched. The patterns behaved unlike any human communication system, yet they also showed undeniable signs of intelligence. There was rhythm, structure, repetition, and adaptation. The signal responded to observation itself, changing slightly every time scientists altered detection methods. That meant one thing: whatever was inside the field knew it was being watched. Meanwhile, new data from the James Webb Space Telescope revealed the object's surrounding distortion had grown more severe. The stars behind 3i Atlas were no longer simply bending into rings. Entire sections of background space appeared stretched and fragmented, as though reality itself was being folded inward. Some physicists compared the images to looking through cracked glass, while others believed the object was partially detaching from normal space-time altogether. Then came the discovery that changed the entire direction of the investigation. One of the trapped satellites briefly transmitted. For less than half a second, an old communication relay thought to be inactive suddenly sent a burst of corrupted telemetry back toward Earth. Most of the transmission was unreadable noise, but buried inside the signal was a timestamp. According to the satellite's internal clock, nearly 340 years had passed inside the temporal cage. The control room went silent. From Earth's perspective, the satellite had only been trapped for a matter of hours, but inside the distortion, centuries had already passed. That single transmission confirmed the impossible. The time dilation field surrounding 3I Atlas was not theoretical. It was functioning exactly as the equations predicted, only at a scale humanity had never imagined achievable. The object had effectively created an artificial deep time environment where centuries could unfold while minutes passed outside. The implications became overwhelming. If an intelligence existed inside that field, then it had already experienced generations of time compared to Earth. Entire civilizations could rise and collapse inside such an environment while humanity barely noticed the passage of a day. The difference between fast time and slow time suddenly stopped being philosophy and became a terrifying physical reality. Some scientists argued that 3I Atlas might not even be a spacecraft in the traditional sense, but rather a mobile temporal habitat, a structure designed to carry civilizations through deep time by slowing their internal clocks relative to the outside universe. Such a system would allow interstellar travel without violating relativity. Instead of moving faster than light, a civilization could simply move slower than time itself. That idea shook the scientific world. For decades, humanity assumed the speed of light was the ultimate barrier separating civilizations across the galaxy. But 3I Atlas suggested another possibility entirely. Advanced species may not conquer distance by traveling faster, but by surviving long enough for the universe itself to move around them. The deeper researchers looked, the stranger the object became. New gamma-ray telemetry showed energy pulses emerging from the center of the field at frequencies matching theoretical higher-dimensional resonance models found in string theory research. Physicists had spent years debating whether extra dimensions truly existed beyond ordinary spacetime, but the resonance signatures surrounding 3I Atlas aligned almost perfectly with mathematical predictions associated with higher dimensional vibration states. In simple terms, the object may have been interacting with dimensions humanity could not directly perceive. Some researchers described it as a shadow from a larger reality pressing into our own universe, while others believed 3I Atlas was using higher dimensions like shortcuts through space-time, bypassing the normal limits of distance entirely. Theories once confined to academic papers were becoming reality, but the most disturbing possibility emerged from the object's energy source. Detailed analysis suggested the field surrounding 3I Atlas was feeding on vacuum energy itself. Instead of generating power conventionally, the object appeared to draw energy directly from space-time fluctuations, converting the quantum activity of empty space into usable fuel. This was something humanity had only imagined theoretically through zero-point energy models, meaning that if true, the object possessed nearly limitless power. Then, Sarah Jenkins noticed something hidden inside the latest neutrino stream. The pulse intervals were beginning to resemble a countdown. At first, the spacing changes seemed random, but once mapped correctly, the sequence formed a descending temporal ratio. The object was no longer simply transmitting information. It was preparing for transition. Across observatories worldwide, emergency simulations began projecting the same outcome. 3I Atlas was approaching a threshold event. The increasing gravitational intensity suggested it was building towards some kind of dimensional jump, possibly detaching itself from ordinary space-time completely. If the calculations were right, the process would begin very soon. Humanity had spent centuries staring into space, wondering whether intelligent life existed somewhere beyond Earth, but now the question had changed entirely. The real question was whether humanity was prepared to witness technology capable of rewriting the laws of reality itself. In the next phase, 3I Atlas would stop observing the solar system and begin leaving it. And the final message, hidden in the collapsing field, might reveal why humanity was chosen to witness the event in the first place. By the time the countdown pattern was verified, global scientific networks had entered full emergency coordination. observatories, defense systems, and research facilities across the planet were no longer treating 3I Atlas as a distant object drifting near the moon. It had become the center of the largest physics event in recorded history. Every hour brought new evidence that the object was preparing for something enormous, and the closer scientists looked, the more terrifying the implications became. The temporal field surrounding the object was no longer stable. It was compressing. Inside the IceCube Observatory, neutrino activity surged to levels never recorded before as particles arrived in violent synchronized waves, flooding the detectors beneath the Antarctic ice. Dr. Sarah Jenkins watched the streams update across the monitors while automated systems struggled to process the incoming data fast enough. The pulses were no longer behaving like communication alone. They resembled instructions, a sequence of operations unfolding step by step. Then, another trapped satellite transited briefly from inside the temporal cage, sending a message even more disturbing than the last. The onboard systems reported severe material degradation, radiation exposure, and internal clock drift equivalent to nearly 2,000 years of elapsed time, even though, from Earth's perspective, only several more hours had passed. The ratio between fast time outside the field and slow time inside it was accelerating rapidly. 1 hour near 3I Atlas was no longer equal to 7 years. Now it was becoming decades. Scientists immediately realized the consequences. If the contraction continued increasing at this pace, the temporal distortion would soon become so extreme that normal matter near the object could begin destabilizing under relativistic stress. Even worse, the growing gravity field suggested that space-time itself was being folded inward around a central point hidden inside the anomaly. For the first time, some researchers openly used the word gateway. The idea sounded impossible, but the evidence kept pushing toward the same conclusion. 3I Atlas appeared to be generating an artificial bridge through higher dimensional space. Not a wormhole in the cinematic sense imagined by popular science fiction, but a controlled rupture in the geometry of space-time itself. The object was creating a passage through what theoretical physicists call the bulk, the higher dimensional structure believed to exist beyond ordinary reality. According to the latest calculations, the bridge was almost ready. At NASA and CERN, simulation models showed a growing frame-dragging effect surrounding the anomaly. Space itself was beginning to rotate around 3I Atlas like water, circling a drain, matching the mathematics of a Kerr black hole where rotational energy twists space-time into a vortex. Unlike a natural black hole, the anomaly remained perfectly controlled, balancing gravitational forces with impossible precision. That level of stability suggested deliberate engineering beyond anything humanity could currently understand. Then the James Webb Space Telescope detected something even stranger. The distortion surrounding 3I Atlas had begun emitting structured gamma-ray bursts carrying repeating harmonic frequencies. The signals matched theoretical resonance models connected to string theory equations, particularly those involving higher dimensional vibration states. Some physicists describe the readings as space-time literally vibrating in organized patterns, looking almost like music encoded into gravity itself. Around the world, people watched news feeds trying to understand the growing crisis, but governments were already losing control of the narrative. Leaked reports spread online, claiming that the object's neutrino transmissions contained geometric sequences impossible to produce naturally. Independent analysts pointed out that the pulses followed ratios associated with advanced mathematical symmetries found throughout physics, from quantum mechanics to cosmology. The deeper humanity looked, the less random the universe appeared. Then Sarah Jenkins made the discovery that changed everything again. Buried inside the latest neutrino burst was a repeating image pattern. At first, the sequence appeared meaningless, but after hours of reconstruction, researchers realized the pulses were forming a three-dimensional map, not of Earth, not of the solar system, but of a massive interconnected structure stretching across regions of space humanity had never explored. If you enjoyed diving into this deep space mystery and want to uncover more mind-bending scientific discoveries that challenge reality itself, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below on what you think 3I Atlas is sending us next.